Good morning and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. Yes, we'll be breaking it down once again verse by verse into factual logical statements in English so we can understand who or what is Allah, what does he mean by the contents of his book, and more importantly for us as non-believers, how does this affect us in our lives in the world today. So before I start, as I always do, I'm going to tell you now, if you have any doubts as to the things I'm about to say, please first buy, read and translate one of these, an Arabic Quran, not an English one. And after you've done that, you'll recognise everything I'm about to read you from my notes here is 100% true and accurate of the words of Allah in his book and what Muslims believe today. So if you've been keeping up the series, you'll remember that we went through some of the things that Allah demands of his Muslims in terms of punishing the non-believers, the Christians and the Jews. Then we went through the Battle of Badr in Saudi Arabia when Muslims and they were led by Mohammed, went in and took Medina as an Islamic place. And then Allah was giving us some reasons why Muslims will always win their battles, but if they don't, while they're having defeats, is all part of his plan, and he's mind controlling them in order for a future victory. So with that in mind, let's carry on. 131. Do not think you can reject or deny obedience to only Allah. Non-believers will be hunted day or night for their failure to fear Allah's rage and evil fire. So always obey only Allah and fear the evil fire prepared well for the evil non-believers, who believe they can reject Islam. End of verse. So if we break this down, we've moved past the battle strategies of victories and why you might see a defeat and how it's not really to be considered a defeat, with Allah sending his angels to, or not sending his angels actually sometimes, in order for you to win. So now we've moved on to the people you're going to kill. We're going to slag them off some more so that you, O Muslim, don't have to feel bad or guilty when you're planning murdering the rest of the world. So that's why he starts off by saying, do not think you can reject or deny obedience to Allah. That's talking to Muslims about us. They're saying to the Muslims, don't let these guys think they can reject or not follow Allah's word, because Allah's word is more important than anything that they currently believe or think, and their cultures are meaningless because they are not being obedient to Allah. That's a great sin. That's what this is telling us. He goes on then to say, non-believers will be hunted day or night. And I think that is a between the lines instruction to his Muslims to always have in mind that their main task is to kill the non-believers. The first task of Sharia is kill all non-believers. So that's why he's specifically saying non-believers will be hunted day or night. It's something that is ongoing. It's not something that you do and then switch off and go home. So anytime you see a non-believer, whether you're being friendly to them now using tackier strategies or whether you're openly hating on them, never let them think that they can get away with not obeying Allah. We'll be hunting them every single day and night 24/7 until they are all deceased. For their failure to fear Allah's rage and evil fire. And what that is referring to, as we know, is Allah's genocidal end times prophecy, which is the main goal of his entire religion. So although they call it a religion of peace, we know how that peace is to be attained. Off of their head you're dead, killing everyone who doesn't agree with it, and then proclaiming on the last day, the end times genocidal prophecy last day, that Allah is victorious, and that will be everyone else being dead in the ground. So the reason he's saying for their failure to fear Allah's rage, he's saying that everyone is born with a fear of Allah. And it's not that they don't know or believe it, they know that that's real. They're actually denying it. So what he's implicating there is that, say, you or I, who aren't a Muslim, we actually know in our hearts that this stuff is true and that we should fear Allah's evil fire, but we're too stupid or evil to do that. And the reason we are too stupid and evil to do that is because we are being mind controlled by Allah and we have Allah disease, as he's previously mentioned. So always obey Allah and fear the evil fire prepared well for the evil non-believers who believe they can reject Islam. And the reason he's saying this is because he's making out that we can't reject Islam. We believe that we can, but in the end he will catch up with us, his Muslims will catch up with us, we will suffer this evil fire whether we like it or not. That's what he's saying. And the reason he's saying this is so Muslims know in their head anything they don't like they have to do. Any questions or doubts that they have, they must quell, because Allah is the last journey of their lives, and it doesn't matter how much they think they can reject this stuff or how much they don't like it, Allah demands that they obey. That's what this means. I'll carry on. 132. Allah forgives those who commit sin in the obedience of his commands and the war against his avowed enemies. So be quick in the race to his obedience and that of his prophet and messenger Mohammed. End verse. You know what, I feel like now, the earlier episodes that I did when I was working from the Green Quran, that Quran never mentions Mohammed by name. His name is not in that whole book. So when they're saying prophet and messenger throughout the early sections we did, when you watch those back in future, when I say prophet and messenger, I'm talking about Mohammed. And that's another reason I think we can say we can conclusively not trust this book. The reason I think, even though it's not expressly written, why Mohammed is not mentioned there but features pretty much every page in this book, is because we're not allowed to speak of Mohammed. And this is a book for non-believers, not for Muslims. But anyway, back to the verse. The reason he's saying Allah forgives those who commit sin in the obedience of his commands is because to complete his commands, you're going to have to do the great sins. To complete his commands, you are going to have to lie, rape, steal, and murder. That is just how it goes. So what Allah is saying here is don't do those things against other Muslims, or they'll be considered sins. But if by doing those things you are actually in obedience of his commands, specifically the war against his avowed enemies, which is Jews, Christians, and white people, then it's okay and you will be forgiven. And that's when Allah says he's oft forgiving, what he's actually talking about. It's not real forgiveness. He's not forgiving you because you accidentally did something bad and now you're remorseful of it. He's forgiving you sins against other people that you did because he told you to do them. So he's saying as long as you're following the Quran of the Muslims, nothing is sinful, everything is permitted, and that is the Assassin's Creed. And if we know history, the assassins were Muslims. So that's where that comes from, that's what this means. Then he finishes off the verse by saying, so be quick in the race to his obedience and that of his prophet and messenger Mohammed. So he's saying it's a race to his obedience, it's a competition. You can't just be a Muslim and be a good Muslim. You have to be a better Muslim than other Muslims. It's a race to the top. Who can be a more close approximation of Muhammad, who in his eyes is the perfect man? So who can kill more non-believers? Who can destroy more other faiths of the world? Who can push more people towards Islam? Who can build the greatest mosque? Who can bring the biggest amount of money to that mosque? It's always a competition, bigger, better, faster, stronger. And that's exactly how Allah feels when he's saying, I'm the most graceful, the most powerful, the most merciful, the most wise. Everything about this guy is competition. He wants to one-up God, and he wants you to one-up the non-believers. And the reason why he ends by saying, obedience to that of him and his prophet and messenger Mohammed, is because while you can't assimilate Allah because he's not a human, Mohammed is a human. You can absolutely do everything Mohammed did, including having sex with children to have lots of different children who will then go and kill the Jews in his holy jihad, and speak only of Allah. Even when he's in sin, he relates it back to his obedience for Allah, and that is what they are saying you should do. That's what this means. 132. You will see only ever fire for your willful disobedience of Allah, O ye who refuse to bow. His paradise garden awaits only those who suffer for Allah and who commit their lives to advancement of his holy jihad. End of verse. So, we're back to the holy jihad, which I think is synonymous with the end times genocidal prophecy. The holy jihad is the process, the end times genocidal prophecy is describing the end. So that's why he mentions this here, and if we break it down, you will see only ever fire for your willful disobedience of Allah, O ye who refuse to bow, is talking about us. He's telling his Muslims, when they see us and we argue or try to defend ourselves, no matter what we say, no matter what we claim is morality or righteousness, it's not what Allah said, so it's not. And what the result of that will be for us is we will only see ever fire. We will never have any good in our lives. We will never be successful. We will never have wealth. We will never see joy or happiness. We will only see ever fire, no matter how we feel. That's what Allah is saying. And the reason we are going to get that is because we are willfully disobedient. What that means is we know what we're doing wrong. So despite the fact that he said at the beginning of the book, everyone has to read this so they can learn about Islam, we are willfully disobedient despite the fact that we don't have access to this because we don't speak Arabic. So between the lines, the implication here is people who don't speak or read Arabic are living in sin because they don't know how to read this book. So that's their willful disobedience. The willful disobedience of the non-believers, you and I, and our families, is because we haven't learned Arabic to a sufficient level to read this book and to obey it. And that is what Allah is saying, O ye who refuse to bow. We're refusing to follow his culture, learn his language, and we are persisting with our own English and Western educations. And that's a great sin. He then goes on, his paradise garden awaits only those who suffer for Allah. So he's saying to his Muslims, even though you're in suffering, because you're suffering for the cause of Allah towards the holy jihad, it's good. That suffering will be rewarded at the end day, not in life. Remember, Allah says you'll never get mercy, forgiveness or reward in life, O Muslims. Once everyone is dead, once all the non-believers are dead in the ground, and then you are the victors and you die, then paradise is created. That is when you're going to get the paradise garden, and you will get the reward for the suffering for Allah. And he who commits his life to advancement of the holy jihad. So he's specifically saying, even if you follow all the other Quran verses, you have to commit to the advancement of his holy jihad. That is the goal. If you're a good Muslim, but you have never killed a Jew, or you've never put money towards a jihad, or you've never supported Palestine, these are the things you must do. Otherwise, you are not obeying Allah, even if you think you are, and you're just as bad as we non-believers, and you will go to the ever fire forever. That's what this means. 134. It is good for you to partake in the wealth held up for them, for it is Allah's bounty of which they did steal. So collect it in reward, and reward freely to your mosque in charity to Allah's righteous cause, the elimination of all those who disbelieve. Ye who show not praise or mercy to his enemies will Allah pardon for their anger. And in his commands are all actions that are good. So follow his verse and commandment to the letter. End of verse. So a long verse, I feel. There's a lot to talk about in this one. He starts off by saying, it is good for you to partake in the wealth held up by them. Them is talking about us non-believers in the West, white people, Christians and Jews. So Allah is saying here, considering the last bit he was saying about suffering in poverty, now he's saying it's good for you, O Muslims, to go over there and partake in the wealth of the non-believers. So Allah is directly saying to his Muslims, go over there, take their money, enjoy their things, steal from them, or use their stuff willingly or non-willingly, it doesn't matter. Enjoy that because it actually belongs to Allah. It's Allah's bounty, not theirs. So the money in my pocket, my flat here, all my equipment and the stuff I have in my life actually belongs to Allah, is what he's telling his Muslims. And the only reason they don't already have it and I have it is because I have stolen it. So this adds to the great sin and the disobedience of Allah's will, which is causing them to feel justified in murdering me by removing my head. That's what Allah is trying to tell us here. If you're a Muslim, anyone who's richer than you who's not a Muslim is a thief and should be killed and then stolen from. And anyone who's a non-Muslim who sees Muslims coming should bow to Allah and allow them to take all that stuff away and effectively submit to slavery. That's what this means. Then he goes on to say, so collect it on and reward it freely to your mosque in charity to Allah's righteous cause. So he's saying, take the money from these Westerners, O Muslims, but don't be keeping it. Give it to your mosque. Otherwise, you're not worshipping enough. That's expressly what he's saying here. So he's saying to his Muslims, go and rob the non-believers so that you can take Allah's bounty back because that's who they've stolen it from. But you can't keep it. If you're a righteous Muslim, you'll give it to your mosque and the mosque will use it for Allah's righteous cause, which as we know is the holy jihad process in order to reach the end times genocidal prophecy where you, me, everyone Western, Jew, Christian, pagan, atheist, any white people are dead with their heads removed. And then he finishes off by saying, ye who show not praise or mercy to his enemies will Allah pardon for their anger. Now that is very violent. If you think about what Allah's saying there, he's saying no matter how angry or violent you are to these non-believers, how badly you beat them and rape their wives and kill them, even though you'll be punished in their laws don't mean anything. Allah will reward you for that, as if you've done a good thing. Then he goes on to say, Allah pardons you for your anger when you do that, as long as you're doing it in his commands, and all the actions in his commands in here are all the actions that are good. So just in case you didn't know, Muslims, when you're raping, killing and torturing these guys, removing their head and enslaving their wife and children, that's good. That's righteousness. Allah tells you so in here. And the fact that they aren't submitting to you while they're resisting and speaking against you in their own defense, that's a great sin. So as you can see, we're going through this page and it's just more and more and more vileness that Muslims have to believe in order that they don't fall foul of Allah and become a punishable criminal themselves. Sharia dictates that this is how they must feel. Allah is literally dictating their feelings. Understand that. They don't have free will. They're not even allowed to have feelings. So Allah wants his Muslims as slaves of the mind, of emotions, and of actions. They are robots of Allah. They have nothing else to do in their lives but this. And he says, "Ye who do not show praise or mercy to his enemies will Allah pardon for their anger in his commands and all the actions that are good. So follow his verse and commandments to the letter." And what he's saying there is, if you don't like this, O Muslims, you're not worshipping me enough, so get to it. And if you don't, you know what will happen to you. So it's a threat to us and to Muslims. That's what this means. And then we reach the last verse, 135. "Allah even loves them who do commit sin, or commit great indecency, who wrong their own souls only in the pursuit of the avowed enemies of Allah. Remember Allah and ask mercy of them, as he permits your sword against them. Though their authority is corrupt, and their wills prevent you from it, only Allah can grant justice or forgiving, so kill the non-believer and never forget the wrongs that they have done." End verse, end of reading. Now, Allah even loves those who do sin or commit a great indecency. What do you think that means? Committing a great sin is one thing. Committing a great indecency is completely another world. So for Allah to say he will love you if you commit a great sin is bad enough, but then to also say he'll love you for your great indecencies, that's almost like saying when you are doing disgusting, depraved acts on children, as long as they're the children of non-believers, as long as you can make propaganda videos using that to further his advancement of the holy jihad, he will love you for that. That's like one of the best things you can do in Islam. As long as you are doing it to those who are the avowed enemies, so that's Jews, Christians, white people, atheists, pagans, in the pursuit of avowed enemies, and who wrong their own souls. So he's saying these guys, because they're not doing this, they're wronging their own souls, and you, when you do this indecency upon them, you will be wronging your own soul, but it's fine, Allah will forgive you. So there's two things you can learn from that. The first one is that Allah is commanding you to commit indecency and to wrong your own soul. Even though you didn't choose it, he's commanding you to wrong your own soul. And the second thing is saying he will love you for it. He's not saying he'll forgive you for it. There's no forgiveness in this. He's saying he will love you for committing that great indecency. Now think about this, O Muslims. If this guy is God, why is he commanding you so expressly to indecency and sin and saying he'll love you for it, when in a previous bit he said that indecent, sinful people should be killed? Think about that. Then he finishes off by saying, only Allah can grant justice or forgiving. So he doesn't say, again, he doesn't say he's going to forgive you for this. He says only he can grant justice or forgiving. So even though he's telling you to go and kill those guys because it's a holy justice for him, it aids his advancement of jihad, he's telling you it's not justice because only he can do justice. You can't. Going over there committing great sins and injustice upon the non-believers, although he told you earlier, is justice. He's telling you now, only Allah can grant justice or forgiving. Only Allah, not you. So when you're going over there with your sin and indecency, and he loves you for it, that's not going to stop you burning in hell. You've still committed that. You still have to atone for that. And I really want you to know that, Muslims. While you're following this, Allah doesn't care what happens to you. All he cares about is the advancement of his holy jihad towards the end times genocidal prophecy, which I may remind you results in everyone being dead. You, me, and your families, my families, everyone. So at least at that point, I will be able to look God in the eyes and say, I lived a good life. I deserve to go to paradise, heaven. You won't. You will have to say that you committed great indecency and sins. And although Allah loved the fact that you did that, he's not going to forgive you for it because he can't. He's too hateful and angry. He even says he's not going to do that. And then the last line is, kill the non-believers and never forget the wrongs they have done. Kill the non-believers and never forget their wrongs. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. If you've never met someone, how can you know what wrongs they've done? If you're killing someone based on the wrongs of their people, that makes you a racist, as we know Allah wants you to be. And the fact that he's saying kill the non-believers, after he said it's only through his authority that justice and forgiving can be done, how is killing the non-believers justice if only Allah can give justice? That means when you're killing the non-believers, it's a sin that he'll love you for, but he cannot forgive you, because it is against God to kill one of God's creatures. And I think this is further proof that Allah is tricking you, O Muslims, into doing his dirty work, which will not be forgiven. He's directing you into a sinful life so that he can have you and burn you in his evil fire, because he is Satan. He's not God. Kill the non-believers and never forget the wrongs they have done. How would you like it if we did that to you? If we just turned up at your door and started slaughtering you, shouting the name of our God and saying it's because of sins that were committed thousands of years ago by people who claim to be in the same tribe as you. It's nothing you've done. That's not God's law at all. That's the opposite of God's law. God's law, number one, is thou shalt not murder. God's whole attitude is that individuals take responsibility for their own actions. And if you walk through the path of Christ, that's the way to get to heaven. It's not by killing people, committing great sins and indecency. Although Allah says he's going to love you for it, it's not going to help you at the end days, is it? When you have to answer for your individual lives, saying that you were following this book is not going to help you. So anyway, that's the summary of this reading. I think what we can tell from this whole page is that Allah really doesn't care about his Muslims any more than he cares about the non-believers. As long as he gets his way, his holy jihad, the spite and punishment he is willing to inflict upon us so that he can spite God, because he can't hurt God. He hurts God by hurting God's children, which is us. And you are the instruments of him attacking God. So you'll have to pay for that in the end days, O Muslims. And I really hope that you understand that. And that's the end of this video. So I hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. We'll be back at 4:15 with more. Until then, have a good evening, God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. So we finish another video and the wait for peace continues. Will we reach peace? Will we get more genocide? Find out tonight at 4:15 when we go through more Without Lies Islam Dies. Until then, have a good evening, God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.